Once upon a time in the late 1970s, my family lived in Albury. We were happy there, but my parents, Jan and Anneliese Willink, longed for a rural property to ultimately retire on. In 1979 they found a suitable block of land at Tabletop, just north of Albury. This 200-acre property had several appealing features. It backed onto a small volcanic hill called Budjaniji, was on an arm of the Hume Weir, and had wonderful views of Tabletop Mountain. We named the property Galatea, meaning a Greek sea nymph. Despite its idyllic location, Galatea had its downsides.
Old man Willink bought a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm there was not much, E-I-E-I-O. With dead trees here and patio there, here it's bare, there it's bare, everywhere it's bare, bare. Old man Willink had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
My parents wanted Galatea to be a productive property with sheep and orchards, but they also dreamed of creating an attractive green haven. They began by planting introduced trees, including nut and fruit trees, poplars, pines, willows and oaks. Some they bought, but most Jan propagated from seed, including acorns scavenged from Melbourne's Royal Botanic Garden. Before long, Jan and Anneliese realised that natives and fodder trees were a better choice for a rural property, so for the next 15 years that's mostly what they planted. The fodder trees, especially the honey locusts, have proved very popular with the sheep. From the mid-1990s, my parents refined their plant selection even further by planting only indigenous natives, that is, natives specific to a 150-kilometre radius of Galatea. And they didn't just vegetate their own land, they also planted along neighbouring roadsides and crown land at Budjaniji. While their tree planting philosophy was evolving, they also developed an appreciation of the need for an understory. This led to the planting of thousands of shrubs, and from shrubs they progressed to an interest in lilies, then grasses, herbs and climbers, culminating in Jan's current passion for native pea flowers. Their propagation takes place in Jan's nursery, using seeds and cuttings from many sites in northeast Victoria and the New South Wales Upper Murray Parks region. Jan's skills in propagating are extraordinary. Not only has he propagated in vast numbers and diverse species, he's also grown challenging plants like the cherry ballard, a root parasite that botanical experts consider extremely difficult to propagate. Seedlings planted at Galatea need protection from rabbits, hares, frost and humans, which meant that early on we looked like sales reps for Bow Repair or a strawberry milk company. My parents have grown over 40,000 plants, of which 95% were propagated by Jan, a feat all the more admirable given he didn't retire from his job in Albury until just 2 years ago.
Old man Willink has a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm they planted much, E-I-E-I-O. With eucalypts here and shrubbery there, here's some grass, there's some peas, everywhere some greenery. Old man Willink has a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
Along with this love for plants came a growing appreciation for wildlife. Jan and Anneliese discovered that the more they planted and the greater the diversity of their planting, the greater and more varied the wildlife they attracted. This led them to experiment with other ways of attracting animals. They created several wetland areas to draw water birds. They've installed 50 nest boxes and actively protected wildlife from hunters. They even created a floating island intended to attract waterfowl, but they hadn't anticipated how wild the weir can get in a storm, and before long their island disintegrated. Indeed, establishing a wildlife sanctuary wasn't without its challenges. Plants have died, and duck hunters have ignored the no-shooting signs. Many bitterly cold winter nights were endured in Galatea's old caravan, and my parents had to contend with family members who preferred reading to planting. But looking back at how things have evolved, there's no doubt that all their hard work has paid off. The wildlife has flourished. 34 years ago, there were only a handful of bird species at Galatea. but the bird population has increased dramatically and at last count numbered over 150 species, with many becoming residents. Every passing year brings new bird species to Galatea, but perhaps one of the most rewarding to become established was the white-browed babbler.
For 3 years I heard a lone babbler calling out, trying to attract a mate. Then it stopped, and I assumed it had disappeared. Then, out of the blue, it returned with a mate. Not long after that, they had a family, and now there are many babbler families all over the place.
Other animals have also been drawn to Galatea, including at least half a dozen species of frogs. More recently, my parents discovered evidence of resident sugar gliders.
I'd been puzzled by some unusual scratch marks on some of our old box eucalypts, until one night Annelies and I spotted a sugar glider climbing down the tree trunk. I then realized these scratch marks had been made by sugar gliders, so they could lick the sap.
It's not surprising how rich in fauna Galatea has become when you consider how much it has changed. In this aerial photo, taken before my parents bought the land, you can't make out the boundaries. But in just 20 years, their native vegetation corridors are very visible. And this was their front gate initially, compared with now. Here's their driveway early on, and here it is now. This is how one of the dams looked once versus today. Views across the property in 1979 are so different from today's. It's quite extraordinary how two people have created such a magnificent and biodiverse landscape. Their dedication and stewardship is an inspiration to us all.
Old Man Willink has a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm they have so much, E-I-E-I-O. With plant life here and wildlife there, here there's life, there's life, everywhere there's life, life. Old Man Willink has a farm, biodiversity.